Marvel Comics Gwenpool is finally coming out of the closet, and they pulled an okie-doke. She's not gay, she's something else, and here to talk to me about that is my good friend Aaron Sparrow. How you doing, Aaron?
I'm doing fantastic, Wes. I love just watching the comic industry just continue to double down on failure.
Well, do you also like watching the YouTube industry double down on success? You were in Vegas recently, weren't you?
Yeah, I absolutely was. I went out to the Friday Night Tights meetup, met Gary from Nerdrotic, Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers. I got to see Steph from My Nerdy Home, who's been on here with us a couple times. Just got to meet everybody. Got to hang out with Chris Gore, which I always love because Chris Gore is always a lot of fun. Guy really loves movies, really loves comics, really loves pop culture entertainment. And like we can just have conversations for hours. So yeah, it was just an absolute blast. Everybody was great. Went out there with MVP, Max Von Priestley. But I would say everybody there was like super welcoming. Sometimes when you go to like a mainstream comic book industry thing, even before I was on YouTube and everybody hated me, you would go to a mainstream comic book thing, and there was always, back in the early 2000s, there was a sense of kind of like camaraderie, and everybody kind of like got along. And this is like kind of like what Chris Gore's Attack of the Dock is about. Is it used to be that nerds would come together, and no matter what, their politics wasn't in it. It was just, the only politics was Star Wars versus Star Trek, or who you sided with in the Marquee War, those kind of things. Who could beat who? Those are the arguments that you would have. There wasn't any of this political nonsense. And now, when you go to a comic show, there's just this feeling of unease. Everybody's kind of like feels like they're sizing each other up. Maybe they're trying to determine who they have to step on to get ahead. Oh, should I be talking to this person? Am I going to get blacklisted because I'm talking to the wrong person? There's a lot of like nervousness that's been injected into kind of the mainstream gatherings. But the Friday Night Tights, on the other hand, I did not feel any ego from anybody there. Everybody was happy to talk to you. Everybody was excited to like have this big gathering of people that are fans of theirs and interact. Gary from Nerdrotic could not have been nicer, more welcoming, more generous with his time. His wife was absolutely lovely. Max and I ended up like working the door at the event and giving people their lanyards and stuff like that, because when we got there, we were like, hey, how can we help? It was just an absolute blast. So you really see why things have moved away from the mainstream and have started to, gravitate towards YouTube, because as much as the comics industry claims to be a community, it's a community with a lot of backstabbing and a lot of, whisper networks, things going on. And I did not get that at all from this YouTube community. I think that, what we're doing here, the channels that we're building and kind of the connections that we're making and the fans that we're talking to, I think we're being very genuine with them. We're giving them our honest opinion, and we're grateful that they're here. And that's something that the comic industry in the mainstream has forgotten.
I would also say the mainstream comic book industry is a community of very bad comic books. Example being Love Unlimited Infinity Comic number 47, coming from writer Jeremy Whitley. The issue, which is the fifth part of a 6-issue storyline that began in Love Unlimited Infinity Comic 43, sees Gwenpool trying to figure out her love life after she becomes close with Julie Power Lightspeed. At one point, Gwen realizes a romantic relationship might not be what she's looking for, and with some help and support from Julie, comes out as asexual. I really like you, and I want to make you happy, Gwen tells Julie, but I can't make myself want something that I don't want, and I don't want to lie to you about wanting it. Hey, I wonder why people aren't reading modern comic books anymore. Aaron?
This is issue 5. I had no idea that there were, 4 previous issues to this. It is on Marvel Unlimited, which is, basically like where comics that they don't know what to do with and they know that won't sell in the direct market go to die. And they're trying to get like a little bit of
generate headlines, but they know they won't sell.
Yeah. And the fact of the matter is, everybody will talk about it. We'll sit here and we'll talk about the fact that Gwenpool has been revealed to be asexual, but it doesn't put butts in the seats. We won't go buy the comic. Nobody who's listening in the chat is going to go buy the comic because of that. Nobody is interested in any of this. Like, and the people that are don't have any money. And they don't buy comic books. They just say, "Oh, I feel so great that the representation," but they don't go buy.
There's a like on Twitter. Good job.
Yeah, good job. That's going to pay your rent. It's like Joe Glass being out there talking about the awards that he's won, but then having to ask people to buy his books because he lost his headphones and he can't afford a new pair. He got overdrafts on his checking account. Can you please buy some books so that my account isn't overdrawn? It's just none of this stuff generates money, and that is what all of this is supposed to do. It's an industry. You're supposed to be selling product to people that want it and keeping them hooked on the product. And these companies have just completely moved away from that. Gwen being asexual is not going to put any butts in the seats.
What is it supposed to do? I don't even get it. I assume that she was gay. Okay, she's not gay. She's asexual. Wow, they don't want to have sex. It's not that interesting. Why don't you go and stop a robbery? And then I'll be interested.
Yeah, doesn't anybody rob banks anymore? Don't villains do anything? Like, why is it all this slice of life? You guys aren't manga. You can't do slice of life because the people that are writing these slice of life comics haven't lived any life. They're inherently boring.
Plus it's Marvel Comics. It's a superhero comic book line. You actually have to do some superhero shit before you can actually pay off anything with their personal lives and have people be invested in the character. No one cares about Gwenpool.
No one has ever.
She's
cared
a
about
fucking
Gwenpool.
variant cover. That's it.
Mm-hmm. And now you're expected to be invested in her love life. I don't care. You know what would have been more interesting to me although it still wouldn't have got me to buy the book, is if she, if Julie was attracted to Gwen and Gwen had to tell her, hey, I'm not gay. I'm sorry I can't be what you want. I really like you, but I'm sorry I can't be what you want. That's a very human thing that could be relatable. But like, you just don't have enough people that are asexual to really make it relatable to anybody. It's not going to get me into the, Gwenpool is not a character that you've even developed enough for me to care about. And then you go, oh, she's asexual. And I'm like, oh, I feel no different than I did a minute ago about this character.
Must be Marvel Comics 2023. And we haven't even talked about Jeremy Whitley yet. He actually said in an interview, he kind of explains this. This guy's pathetic. And he's the perfect example about what modern comic books are at Marvel and DC. It's a bunch of people that hate superheroes, don't really like action storytelling, and would rather be writing anything in the world than what they're actually doing now. This is what Jeremy Whitley said about the issue. I think, especially with queer characters, there is this tendency to put their relationships up on a pedestal. Once you've found a person you care about, you do whatever you have to do to preserve that romantic relationship. While it's an understandable impulse, it's ultimately an unhealthy one. Denying what you actually want and need is poisonous to any relationship. Julie is a character who has had to find her own path, and it has been a winding one, from Power Pack to Avengers Academy to Runaways to Future Foundation. Julie's had a lot of loss and a few painful breakups. She realizes now the importance of asking for what you need, and ultimately recognizing the things you want and don't want in a relationship is extremely important. For Gwen, that relationship doesn't include sex. For Julie, it absolutely does. Nobody should be made to feel bad about what they need. It's okay to value your own happiness above continuing to feed a relationship that's not fulfilling you. That is the most lame-ass, boring fucking quote about a comic book in the history of the world. No wonder nobody in their right mind would ever fucking buy a Jeremy Whitley comic book. Like, can you...
He almost, in his opening sentence, God, that was so boring. In the opening sentence, he almost comes close to discovering something when he says that, in comics, they tend to put queer relationships on a pedestal. Yes, they do. They absolutely do. But instead of really exploring that, because you can't, the reason that they're up on a pedestal is because you cannot say anything negative or have anything negative happen in an LGBT relationship in comic books, because then you're a bigot. Do you remember all the hate that the creators of Batwoman got when they broke up Maggie Sawyer and Kate Kane? You can't have any kind of complications in a gay relationship in comic books, because all of a sudden then you've got Twitter weirdos screaming at you that you're a homophobe. Even though gay relationships are very much like straight relationships, they break up all the time. People get together who aren't compatible. They have fights, they have conflicts, they get divorced. All of these things happen in these relationships, but you're not allowed to portray that. And Jeremy was almost close to a point there, but then he had to veer into, just putting things on a pedestal.
Whitley.
Yeah, just being Jeremy Whitley. He's just one of those guys that, like, I don't know if he actually believes this stuff, if he actually believes the stuff that he's saying, or if he's just one of those go along to get along guys. Like, I need to get work, so I need to say all the right things. I can't ever have any kind of like view that breaks the hive mind. I don't know. I've met him once. We had a very brief exchange. He was very pleasant. I probably would enjoy talking to him a little bit, but I just don't know. I don't know where he's coming from, and this statement doesn't give me any clearer idea.
No, this is what's killing comic books. All the writing talent associated with major comic books right now would rather do anything but write comic books. It's never about action. It's never about superheroics. It's never about saving the day. It's never about being that aspirational figure that people can learn from and aspire to be. it's always grounded in the stupid, lame-ass bullshit and eating fucking kebabs at a table or something.
It's funny that you say that. All I want to do is like read a story about Spider-Man fighting the Scorpion. If I was writing, all I would want to do is write a story about that. Here's the plot. Here's what the bad guy wants. Here's the superhero trying to stop him while, dealing with all of his problems. That's all that I want out of a comic book. At Merc on Miss Me Out, I got to write a fight that took place over 3 issues. 3 issues. You don't get that from Marvel anymore. You don't get big fights like that. You don't get big back and forths. You get maybe a page or 2 of fighting, and you can tell the writer's very disinterested in it. The hero will just one-shot the villain so that they can go back to eating their goddamn kebabs.
Well, normally it's not even the hero. It's whatever the female sidekick, even if she's not a superhero. She'll actually come in and save the day because the guy can't win.
I'm in favor of all sorts of stories. I've said that before on the channel. If you want to have these stories, you absolutely should. There should be stories that are made for these audiences. You just have to understand that that's a niche audience and it's not going to sell as well. What you have to stop doing is stop trying to force all this into the mainstream audience and then expecting success. Everybody's walking away. Sales are down. Sales are in the toilet. No matter how many people tell you that, the industry is healthier than ever. It's because you're including manga. Manga is a juggernaut. And you know why? Because the core of manga is so satisfying to its mainstream middle-of-the-road audience. Much of it is built for that audience. But then you also have mangas that are built for smaller audiences. But because the whole industry is successful, that rising tide is raising all the ships. So you can do a bunch of different genres. You can do yaoi. You can do, all these things that, appeal to a smaller audience. They're all buoyed by the fact that manga is doing so well. And until the comic book industry in America realizes that you have to return to the core principle, you have to dance with who brought you, which I'm sorry is heterosexual males, you're not going to have the success of manga. You're not going to be able to do it.
Well, I don't think manga writers are ashamed of who they are, what they're creating, or what their audience is. You can tell like a Jeremy Whitley, a Tini Howard, a Megan Fitzmartin are ashamed to be associated with comic books. They're trying to raise comic books up to what they would like it to be, even though the audience firmly rejects basically every single thing that they create because it's never for a comic book buying audience. It's never superheroes. It's always some weird niche slice of life bullshit, and they want to feed this to you because they're so ashamed that they have to be associated with superheroes. It's like Hollywood in the 90s and early 2000s. They wanted to make superhero movies, but they couldn't take them fucking seriously.
No, they were very embarrassed. It's like you had to put the X-Men in black leather, even in the 2000s because, if we put them in their costumes, it's too goofy. And then we see, fast forward to when Marvel was, the MCU was rocking. And they're like, yeah, we're putting characters in costumes that are, that look like they're comic book costumes. We're embellishing them a little bit, but, it's recognizable. It's iconic. And eventually they got to a point where they're like, let's make a movie with a talking raccoon and a talking tree and see how that does. And people loved it. It's like there's a reason that these things have endured. There's a reason that people have gravitated towards them. And there's a reason that a mainstream audience will also gravitate towards them. But when you stop trying to appeal to a mainstream audience, this is what you get. Tini Howard would much rather be writing a book about LARPing. I don't know why she doesn't go do that. I don't know why she doesn't create her own comic about a group of friends that are LARPers and then, tell some kind of story. There's no money in it. Yeah, there's no money in it. And also because you don't have the leg up of an established IP. It's cultural vandalism. They're coming in and they're saying, how do I tell my stories using these characters from the X-Men that I don't like? Well, I'll just change everything about them and make them, the characters in name only. I'll make them my idea of, I'll just stretch them around, the characters that I would create if I could. But it doesn't. It backfires. The people that are fans of this walk away. None of it rings true, and you just get a very much smaller audience until we eventually crash, which is where we're heading. We're seeing it this year. We're seeing media crash. We're seeing everything that's woke, quote unquote woke, which term you and I don't use, very much, is starting to collapse. Your Vices, your BuzzFeeds. It only appeals to the far left, and the far left is a very small slice of the left. The mainstream left isn't even interested in it. So what have you done? You've just shot yourself in the foot, and we're going to see it. IDW is, collapsing right now. They're going to try to restructure again. It's basically just putting the whole thing on life support. They've got no IPs that, are worth anything. Yeah, good job. Winona Earp was really going to get you guys to the dance. Glad you poured so much money into that. What are you doing?
The good thing is we do know that Gwenpool is modeled after Heather Ontos, and Not only did they destroy the character that's modeled after her, but she also got a promotion out of this IDW thing this week. Somehow she got promoted over senior editor. Is that well earned?
I mean, it's just playing a game of last man standing or last woman standing. It's kind of funny.
Who's pathetic enough that they can't leave even though they know that we're dying?
Well, and also, promotion doesn't necessarily mean that you got more money out of a dying company. It just means that, hey, we fired a bunch of people. Guess what? Your title's been upped, but you're not really getting any more money. You just have to do more work now. So, that's how these things usually work. But hey, you know what? IDW is a sinking ship. If you want to keep some people on there, rearranging the deck chairs, that's cool. Good for you. But your company is done. It's done. You're not going to be able to pull out of this. You don't have the IP. You don't, not these deals right now. You're just hoping that you get these Netflix deals. You're hoping that you get these movie deals based on what little IP you do have. But all of the studios are collapsing. Netflix isn't spending money. They're investing in K-dramas because it's cheap to get and people are into them. Rather than spending millions and millions of dollars on their own productions. So yeah, hey, good job. Good job, IDW. Keep it going. We're all pulling for you. We think you're really gonna do it this time.
Gwenpool is not the only character in mainstream comic books to come out as asexual within the last couple of years. In fact, Connor Hawke came out as asexual in Pride 2022 at DC Comics. This thing was a train wreck, made no sense, and I broke it all down right here. If you haven't seen the video, there's also a link in the video description.